Most business owners are managing change completely backward, and I'm going to show you exactly what executive leaders understand about transformation that keeps them 10 steps ahead. This isn't about having more resources or bigger teams. It's about a fundamental shift in how you see change itself. And once you understand this framework, everything about how you run your business starts to click differently. I've worked with business owners at every level, and here's what I've noticed. The ones who scale successfully don't just react to change differently. They think about it from an entirely different paradigm. And today, I'm breaking down 3 specific ways executive leaders approach transformation that most business owners completely miss. First, we're talking about the mindset shift from reactive to strategic. Then the framework they use to turn change into competitive advantage. And finally, how they orchestrate evolution instead of just managing problems. So if you're ready to think like an executive leader, let's dive in. Here's where most business owners get stuck. They're in what I call the reactive trap. Something shifts in the market, a competitor makes a move, technology changes, and immediately it's all hands on deck to respond. Sound familiar? Now here's what's important to understand. Being responsive isn't wrong, but there's a massive difference between responsive and reactive. And this is the first thing executive leaders get that others miss. Picture this scenario. Imagine your industry faces a significant disruption. Most business owners immediately ask, how do we deal with this? They're focused on the problem right in front of them. They're managing the symptoms. But executive leaders, they're asking completely different questions. They're asking, what does this reveal about where our industry is heading? What opportunities does this disruption create? How can we position ourselves ahead of the next wave? See the difference? One approach is about surviving the change. The other is about using change as intelligence. It's strategic foresight versus tactical response. And this isn't about having some magical ability to predict the future. It's about fundamentally different thinking patterns. When you're reactive, you're always playing catch-up. When you're strategic, you're playing a completely different game. Executive leaders have trained themselves to see change not as a problem to solve, but as information to leverage. Every market shift, every disruption, every unexpected challenge becomes data about where things are moving. And that shift in perspective? That's the foundation of everything else we're going to talk about. Quick question before we continue. When change hits your business, are you typically in reactive mode or strategic mode? Be honest with yourself. Drop your answer in the comments. I'm really curious where everyone's at with this. All right, now that you understand the mindset difference, let's talk about the actual framework executive leaders use. This is where it gets really practical. Most business owners, when they look at change, they see individual problems. A sales process that's not converting, a team member who's struggling, a marketing channel that's stopped working, and they address each issue as it comes up. One problem, one solution. Another problem, another solution. But here's what executive leaders understand. Everything is connected. They're not seeing isolated problems. They're seeing symptoms of larger systemic patterns. And this completely changes how they respond. Let me illustrate this. Imagine a business owner notices customer complaints are increasing. The reactive approach? Fix the complaints. Train the customer service team. Maybe implement a new response system. But the strategic approach? They ask, why are complaints actually increasing? Is this revealing a disconnect between what we're promising and what we're delivering? Is our customer base changing? Is our positioning attracting the wrong clients? What's the underlying system creating these symptoms? And here's the powerful part. When you solve at the system level instead of the symptom level, you don't just fix one problem. You transform the conditions that were creating multiple problems. You're working on the business architecture itself. Executive leaders have trained themselves to always zoom out, to see the bigger patterns. to understand that sustainable transformation doesn't come from fighting fires. It comes from redesigning the building so it doesn't catch fire in the first place. This is the framework shift, from symptom management to system transformation. And once you start seeing your business through this lens, you can't unsee it. Everything starts making more sense. Now, if you're finding this valuable, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because we're about to get into the most powerful part of this entire framework, the piece that actually turns change into competitive advantage. And you're not going to want to miss this. Here's where everything we've talked about comes together. Executive leaders don't just manage change. They orchestrate evolution. And there's a profound difference. When you're managing change, you're reacting to what's already happened. You're controlling variables. You're minimizing disruption. You're keeping things stable. And again, none of that is wrong, but it's fundamentally defensive. Orchestrating evolution is something completely different. It's proactive. It's creative. It's about deliberately shaping your business transformation instead of just responding to external forces. Think about an orchestra conductor for a moment. They're not just keeping everyone in time. They're shaping the entire experience. They're building tension and release. They're creating something greater than the sum of its parts. They're working with multiple elements simultaneously to create a cohesive direction. That's what executive leaders do with organizational change. They're asking, how do we want our business to evolve? What capabilities do we need to build now for where we're going? How do we align our team, our systems, our positioning around a deliberate direction? They're not waiting for change to happen to them. They're initiating transformation based on their strategic vision. And here's the critical insight. This makes them incredibly hard to compete against. Because while everyone else is scrambling to respond to market changes, executive leaders have already positioned themselves for what's coming. They've been orchestrating their evolution toward that future. They're not playing catch-up. They're setting the pace. This is how change becomes competitive advantage. Not by being the fastest to react, but by being the most intentional about evolution. By seeing change not as something that happens to you, but as something you actively shape and direct. And when you shift from managing problems to orchestrating evolution, everything about how you lead transforms. You become the strategic architect of your business future instead of the firefighter of its present. So let's bring this all together. We've covered 3 fundamental ways executive leaders think about change that most business owners miss. First, the mindset shift from reactive response to strategic foresight. They see change as intelligence, not just problems to solve. They're asking different questions that position them ahead of disruption instead of behind it. Second, the framework shift from managing symptoms to transforming systems. They zoom out to see the bigger patterns and address root causes instead of fighting individual fires. They're working on business architecture, not just business problems. And third, orchestrating evolution instead of managing change. They're proactive, intentional, and strategic about shaping transformation. They're not waiting for change to happen. They're deliberately creating it. These aren't 3 separate ideas. They're an integrated approach to transformation that fundamentally changes how you lead. And here's what's exciting. This is completely learnable. It's not about having more resources. It's about developing a different way of seeing and thinking. I want to know which of these 3 shifts resonates most with you. The mindset shift, the framework shift, or the orchestration approach. Drop it in the comments and tell me why. I read every single comment and I'm genuinely curious what lands for different people. So here's what I want you to do with this. Over the next week, start noticing your default patterns. When change hits your business, are you asking reactive questions or strategic questions? Are you addressing symptoms or systems? Are you managing or orchestrating? Just that awareness alone will start shifting how you approach transformation. because you can't change what you don't see. And once you start seeing these patterns, you can deliberately choose different approaches. Think about one change or challenge you're currently facing in your business. Now run it through this framework. What would the strategic perspective reveal? What system might these symptoms be pointing to? How could you orchestrate evolution around this instead of just managing the problem? That's where transformation actually begins. If this shifted how you think about change in your business, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We go deep on strategic transformation and executive leadership frameworks that actually work in the real world. And if you want to go even deeper, I've got another video specifically about how to assess your current transformation readiness. It's the perfect next step after this one. You'll find it linked right here. Hit that like button if you found this valuable. Drop your biggest takeaway in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video where we're talking about the specific frameworks executive leaders use to make transformations sustainable. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.